Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 3 of Raw and Unscripted. We are so glad that you are here. I'm Kim Basler, and Kellyanne is here with me. We are both working here on getting our social media up to date so that we can share this out to all of you. And maybe if you feel called, you can share it out as well. Good morning, Kellyanne.
Good morning, Kim. How are you?
I am very, very well.
Wonderful. I am just getting this set up to go into my Facebook group
Beautiful.
live. This is always my challenge, as you know.
You go ahead and do that. I'm just going to welcome those of you that are tuning in live. This is our third episode that Kellyanne and I have put out into the world, and we are just so excited. So please, if you're tuning in live with us right now, let us know that you're here. Say hello. It not only allows us to connect with you so that we can, know who's here and watching, but truthfully, it also helps to pump it out into the social media world. It helps with the algorithm if you can share it out to your community if you feel called, but for sure, type inside those comments. Let us know that you're here. We always know, right, Kellyanne, that there's people watching. We can see you watching.
Yes.
I have to admit as well, there's been many times that I've been watching a live stream from someone and they're like, we know you're here. Yeah. Stop creeping in the background. So please say hello to us and let us know where you're tuning in from.
And welcome today. Today Kim is going to share her story, and we believe so deeply in the power of our stories, and both Kim and I have created the work that we do because of our story, and it's deeply embedded in the work that we do. And Kim shares from the experiences I've had with Kim in different groups. Kim shares from such a deep heart space, and she shares so beautifully. So I know that everybody here will take something from your story. And as we've talked about before, our stories may be very different, but in many ways they are so connected. And you will find something in Kim's story that you will resonate with. That I believe that every story that you hear changes you in some way. So today I want you to be prepared for that change that you're going to feel today as Kim beautifully shares her story.
Thank you for that, Kellyanne. Thank you. So because we like to keep these podcasts around 30 minutes or so, obviously, that's probably one of the reasons why we want to have this podcast and to share, because we do have so much that we've experienced that we know that we need to share it with other people. So today will be a beautifully condensed version, as Kellyanne's was last week. We really do hope you watched Kellyanne's episode last week. And if you haven't, make sure you head on over to our YouTube channel where that's there for you. So the work that I will do, I'll start by saying that the work that I am so honored and privileged to get to do, the healing that I've done in my own life and continue to do, is wrapped around our role as women, our role as daughters, what we're supposed to look like in society, what we're supposed to do for other people to make them happy, to make them more comfortable, and to be our best. And, there's lots of different reasons why I think my story, took the path that it did. I grew up in a home like many of you maybe did, maybe to different levels of intensity around dieting. I mean, I was a child was born in 1975. So in the 1980s, it was all about, fat-free this and fat-free that, and calorie counting and Weight Watchers and points. And I mean, a lot of that still exists to this day. And I grew up in this environment with my mother, and I grew up with it from a very young age because my mother was a leader of a weight loss group. So I took that path, Kellyanne, and everyone, where I didn't necessarily grow up with the same relationship with food that maybe you did. Food in my home was very much like we were fed, we were nourished, but I did see some of the patterns that my mother was doing, and so many women are doing in order to try and control the size of our bodies because of what diet culture has taught us about what we're supposed to look like. And also it took away our intuitive abilities to listen how to trust our bodies and feed them. And so that path, when I started dieting at 12 years old and, essentially starting to weigh my body on a scale, count my calories, track, that became, I really believe that was the foundation and the precursor to me not being enough. Because when you are tracking your weight on a scale and you are hyper focused about what you put in your body, that then causes you to get hyper focused around what you look like compared to the people around you. And of course, like Kellyanne, I'm sure you can relate that when we're young girls and our bodies are changing right around that 12, 13-year-old age, no one's talking to us about body diversity. Nobody's talking to us about how we all mature and our bodies change at different paces. Nobody talks to us about how our parents and the genetics of our parents has something to do with how we look. That information wasn't out there, and it still isn't out there.
I think, and you are so right, Kim, like nobody talked about that. There was one way. I mean, and I'm older than you, but there was one way to look. And if you didn't look that way, then that impacted your self-image and your idea of your worth. But what you are doing now is you are changing the narrative around that. And that is so amazing because so many people need to hear what you are sharing. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you. I think it's also important for me to share just a tiny little bit that, again, there's different reasons why some people can grow up with certain behaviors happening around them, and it necessarily doesn't impact them the way it does other people. And I also, in my home, was lacking love and connection from my father, something that I don't talk a lot about, but it's also a piece of my story. When we are not feeling like what we're getting, like we're not getting that love from the people that we need it from, whether they can't give it to us or not, we then somehow internalize that there might be something wrong with us. And we think as women that if we change our outside appearance, if we control our outside appearance, that we will get more love. Like it's not something that I can certainly summarize in just a few minutes, but I want those of you that are listening to understand the depth to it, because you might be sitting here going, you know what, Kim, I've dieted my whole life. And that's essentially my story. I want us to summarize this to some level, and I can talk about another piece of my story in a moment, but I dieted for 20 years, 30 years of my life, from the age of 12 years old until I was 41. I weighed myself every single day on a scale. There was a period of my life through my high school years where I was living alongside an eating disorder, where I was sometimes on that scale 2, 3, 4 times a day. There was a lot of control around food. There was a lot of restriction. And with that also came an obsession with exercise. Because of course, once I became 14 years old and I was able to join a gym, I knew society tells us eat less, exercise more, you're going to be able to keep your body smaller, right? So I went into the fitness industry, became an instructor at 16. And these are some of the parts of my story that, as much as we know that healthy movement and taking care of our bodies is important, both through the foods that we consume, but also how we move our bodies, there is a level where there is too much. And there is a level where those behaviors and the reason why you're doing them isn't coming from a healthy place. It's just that we don't talk about it, right, Kellyanne?
Exactly. And I think, Kim, you really touched on what your childhood and many people do not understand that that conditioning, those beliefs that were implanted in you, many of which do not serve us, but they become part of our subconscious program that just keeps running over and over and over and over again. And that comes into our life. And many of us never, ever learn to change that programming that isn't working. So, you have been able to change that programming. And I know that came with a lot of work on you. Um, but you are an amazing example that it can be done, that programming that doesn't work for you, that so much of it is a part of your childhood. And that's not to blame our
Mhm.
parents, that's not to blame anybody, but it is the reality that those beliefs that became a part of us before the age of 7, before the age of 12, those are the beliefs that are often running the show for us and that are not serving us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what we have to, like, if you're listening right now, and thank you to those of you that are tuning in live with us, like, sometimes we're just operating in a certain way. We know, I think, I believe, and I know Kellyanne believes this, down deep, there is that feeling like this isn't working for me. I'm exhausted. I'm overwhelmed.
Mhm.
I'm unhappy. I'm lonely, like whatever it is, fill in the blank for you. But we don't know where it's coming from.
Mhm.
And I wish I could say that the reason I am where I am right now is because I recognized it, but no, like I I dealt with burnout on multiple levels because my not being enough from that young age turned into perfectionism, turned into comparison, turned into being a workaholic, right? So like it really took over a lot of my life. I believe the dieting and the body struggles and the food issues, that's where it started, right? That's where I was gripping onto something and trying to control what I couldn't control. I could focus on the food, right? But then it got bigger and bigger, especially when you go into, like, I was working full time in the fitness industry with 70 instructors that reported to me and 5 different clubs in 3 different regions. I'm a people pleaser. I'm a recovering people pleaser. And there's a lot of type A personalities in that industry. And when you're trying to prove yourself to everyone else, and you have this internal dialogue that constantly tells you that you're not enough, it leads to sickness, which is essentially what happened for me. That level of stress that I carried for 3 decades of my life led to chronic body hives all over my body, led to chest pains, led to the inability to sleep, led to issues in my marriage, issues in my role as being a loving mother. Like, it went everywhere. And so when I, in 2016, when I was sitting around with my family at Thanksgiving and trying to be around people that were happy, focusing on gratitude, inside I was crumbling. But I kept putting on the masks. Like, don't we do this? Those of you that are listening, I want you to think about that. What are the masks that you're putting on in order to just get through your day, in order to just be in that relationship or to have that person in your life? And you're putting on the masks because we harden our shell in order to get through the world. Some days are really, really hard, but on that day, with my family on Thanksgiving in 2016, I believe in God. Whether you believe in God or a higher power, energy source, whatever it is, that is what came through for me to say, you need help, get out. And that's when I left my career. I didn't think I was leaving, Kellyanne. Like, I left on a leave of absence. I felt shameful. I felt like I failed. I was like hiding from the world for at least a month in my home because I literally disappeared off the face of the earth. But that changed it all for me. I needed to go there.
And I think sometimes we have to get to that point of that lowest of the low to really see that we have to make a change. Some people don't have to get there,
Mm.
but many people do have to get there. They have to get to that lowest of the low. And you talking about, and thank you for sharing all of that so vulnerably, Kim, because um I think that you had to let go of a career,
Mhm.
and that is hard. I mean, and in many ways, my story is similar in that I had to let go of a career that wasn't aligned, that was keeping me stuck, and that's part of doing this work and becoming your best self. is you may have to let go of things that you maybe didn't plan to let go of, or that you are holding on to deeply. And that is the challenge of becoming your best self.
Mm. It's so true. And I think about this, what we grip onto. So I recognize, I honestly, I have to admit, like, it's not like I chose, I didn't consciously leave my career. Like I don't think I would have been strong enough to do that. I was exiting it for a period of time to kind of go, what is going on? I realized that I couldn't go back to it. There was, once you open up and you go, yeah, there's a lot of healing here. This industry, the push culture, the hustle culture, the body, fixation in the fitness industry, that was not going to be an environment where I was going to heal. But what else is it, right? Like, what else are we gripping onto? I recognize that I left my career financially. I was able to, yes, we've had to make changes. I think that that's an important thing to recognize too, that sometimes we hold on to things because we want to hold on to the lifestyle that comes with it. But at what cost, right? So maybe you can't leave your job right now, but I want you to start to look at those pieces. We want you to start to look at those pieces of what are you holding on to because you feel you should. I should hold on to this. I've had this career. I went to university. I've got my master's in this. I can't leave this career because I've put my whole life and money into it. These are the things we want to challenge you on.
Because the reality is that your mind wants to keep you safe.
Mhm.
Your mind is not, it is there to continue the patterns, to keep that familiarity. And even though you are in situations, relationships, careers, whatever it is that are not working for you, do not feel good, do not make you happy, they are comfortable and they are familiar. And it's easy to stay in them, whether it's for economic reasons, whether it's, because this is what I'm supposed to do.
Mhm.
But your life is not meant to be just fine.
Mm.
You are meant for so much more than fine or okay
Mm.
or I'm surviving.
Yeah.
There's so much more for you.
Oh,
And
that's
that's what
so.
we want to remind people of, I think.
Yeah. Like, and this is the thing, like some of these conversations that Kellyanne and I are going to have, like, there is going to be moments that are going to like drop you, but we never promise, we promise we will never leave you there. We will always lift you back up, but really understanding that, your life is there for you to live. And we were never meant to wake up every morning and dread the day, right? I can say to you now, and I'm going to let you take the conversation in a second as my computer has to be plugged in. But I can say to you now, the person that is here before you now, I am still healing. We will always be on, those of us that are committed to our healing journeys, like those limiting beliefs, those wounds that I took on as a child, they're still there in me. And so different things will have them show up. I'm committed to that. I allow myself to be vulnerable. I have beautiful people in my life that support me with that. But who I am now, and recognizing that the healing that I've done with my relationship with food, how I feel about moving my body, my self-care, like these are all parts of my story that I'm now supporting other women with. And that is why this is such a beautiful thing. We've talked about this before, Kellyanne and I, of that everything has happened to us for a reason. What is the reason behind this? And this is the reason that I get to meet beautiful women from all around the world, and men too. I mean, I coached a man, Kellyanne, a professional athlete out in New Zealand who found me through the internet, who had a relationship with food that was causing challenges in his sport, in his career. I get to do this because of the challenges and the pain points that I've lived through. And I couldn't be more grateful for that.
And I think, and I totally agree, I think Kim and I both come from a space of these lived experiences. So we do the work, we have these conversations, we do the work that we do because we've been there. We've been there. And as Kim said, it is, and I always tell people, this is a practice. Healing is a daily practice. And I have a client who I have shared this with, and I think it's so true. And this is kind of what I go back to every time I have a trigger or I have something that comes up for me that to me, it's another little test that shows me that I am growing,
Mhm.
that I am responding differently than I once was. So it doesn't mean that because you are on this healing journey that you're ever going to get to the end of it. There are layers and layers and layers. But there is also a freedom. There is a freedom in the awareness that I have a past that I have beliefs that have created this reality for me, but I have the power to change those beliefs. I have the power to change my reality. I have the power to create whatever I desire in my life.
Mm.
And that's why Kim and I do what we do, because we know how powerful, as women, as men, as individuals, we know how powerful we can be, but sometimes we forget our power.
Mm.
And we are here to remind you of your power.
I love that. I love that. I also feel like I want to share this though, because I've had this shared with me many times. So I'll keep linking this back to my story. So when it comes to healing our relationships with food, body image, burying ourselves in our work as a distraction to avoid the things that we really should be looking at. I look at this world where almost many times a day I hear conversations about people not liking their bodies, just regular in the grocery store. I see people posting before and after pictures. I see people saying, I don't want to have my picture taken because I don't like the way that I look. Like, it's everywhere. So these triggers or these things that, like, attach onto us because there's still a part of us that has this healing to do. I know that it can be, people will say to me, like, when is it done? Like, it's exhausting for people. And there's this place of like shame when they get pulled back again. Like when somebody knows that the scale is not supportive to them and they get pulled back to it. And then they're afraid to tell me. But I always say, like, you have to meet yourself where you are and know that there is no right or wrong way to healing, to doing this work, and that where you are is perfect. Like, it's perfect. And knowing that, I always use the analogy, Kellyanne, of like a staircase, where you might go up a couple stairs and then there's a landing. There's a landing where you can rest your feet on and get grounded for a while, because it is work. And we don't always have the emotional capacity and the mental capacity, all of that, to show up each day in the ways that we want to. And that's part of the healing, is to give yourself forgiveness and self-compassion and say, yeah, today I got pulled back, right?
Exactly. And I like to use the analogy of the elastic band, that we are, that conditioning that we have talked about, that those beliefs that are so deep within us, we can push ourselves out of those and push ourselves out of that familiar, out of that comfort zone. But they are strong and they will continue. It's like the elastic band, they will pull you back. And that's okay. It's okay to get pulled back, and it's okay to to be disappointed in how you respond or how you react to things. But it's in that awareness that we start to grow. Because if you don't have the awareness, you're not growing. But as soon as you start to see, okay, yeah, I was kind of pulled back to somewhere I don't want to be, that awareness is what changes people. So celebrate every time you have that awareness, because that is growth,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. I mean, everything starts with awareness, being
Yes.
able to recognize, like, this might this might be a path that you want to go on. You might want to try another diet. You might want to do this, but I get to choose what's right for me right now. And I will again link it back just for a brief moment around like these places of pain. So you say that the body wants to feel safe. So in a world where we often do not feel safe in the bodies that we're in, because they don't meet societal's constantly changing expectations of us, we will want to find something to gravitate to control what we feel is a lack of control within ourselves. And sometimes also, I look at some of our patterns around, like I'm trained in eating psychology and mind body nutrition. I think it's important to acknowledge that. So the work that I do doesn't come from like a typical health coach. Like I'm looking at the underlying relationship with food. I'm going down into the root, into the cause of where this has come from. And people often think that their challenges around food, their challenges around their weight have to do with food. And I will say that to some level, yes, there's a piece of that, but it's not where it started from. It's not where it started from. And so when you find yourself being triggered, being pulled back, this is why I say that this is an opportunity. This is a gift for you. I look at this as a gift. If I find myself wanting to diet again all of a sudden and try to get my body smaller intentionally, I look at that and go, well, what's going on? Like, why? Why has this shown up for me? There's wisdom in all of this information.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
And I just want to, Kim, is there anything else that you want to share?
Yeah, I guess for those of you that are listening, we thank you so much for being here. I see that you're here. We see that you're here. So again, we know that the conversations that we're going to be talking about in Raw and Unscripted are sensitive ones sometimes. They're ones that we don't want to show up and talk about in the comments. Like what Kellyanne and I are doing, we require bravery and courage to show up to you this way. So if you're here right now listening and you have questions about any of the content that I spoke about today, maybe you saw yourself in it, feel free to reach out to Kellyanne or myself. We're both available through Facebook. We're both on Instagram. We can drop that in the comments to this feed. And I will just say from my angle, because today's episode is about my story, is to understand that if you are listening right now and you are feeling a sense of failure within yourself, or feeling like you don't have the willpower that's required, or that you just quit on yourself all the time, I want you to understand that the behaviors that you might be doing right now around food are here as a way to try and keep you safe. It's a way that you've learned to cope with whatever it is you're experiencing. And that's where this healing begins. And I'm here for it. I'm always here for it. We both are. I think that's where I'll end for today, Kellyanne.
Kim, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story so beautifully, as I knew you would, and for being vulnerable, because it does take a lot of courage. And to me, vulnerability is the truest form of courage. So thank you for your share. And I know that somebody somewhere needs to hear what you have to say. So please keep doing the work that you're doing. We touched a little bit today on childhood. And that was part of Kim's story. That was also part of my story. And we're going to give you a little sneak peek into what we're going to talk about next week, because we both experienced, maybe in different ways, some kind of a trauma. We're going to talk more about trauma, because people see trauma very differently. They have very different definitions of trauma, but we maybe look at trauma a little bit differently than you might. And so we are going to be sharing a little bit about trauma, because you may not realize this, but my guess is that every single person in the world has suffered some kind of trauma, whether that is trauma with a small t or a capital T. And we're going to go into that next week. But whatever that trauma is, it is affecting you somehow. So we just want to share, um, just again, to bring that awareness to things to help you to know yourself better, because all of the answers that you need are within you. Sometimes you just need some support and some guidance to help find them. So thank you so much, Kim, for your sharing today. And thank you to all those who have been here and all those who watch us on YouTube. We are excited to chat with you next week. I'll be in Florida, so I'll be coming to you from Florida next week. But we want you to have an amazing day. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, everyone. Take care of yourselves.
Bye-bye.